Are we recording? Is this thing on?
Yes, it is. Welcome to RevOps 500, where we invite the world's top marketers to answer the tough questions facing growing organizations.
Ooh, sounds important.
I'm Sajeel Qureshi.
And I'm Gil Bates. Join us as we dive deep into the world of RevOps.
We'll be learning strategies and expertise from firsthand experience. RevOps 500 is sponsored by Computan. They provide technical and development expertise to growth-focused marketing teams.
Let's get started.
Hey everyone, Sajeel Qureshi here with another episode of RevOps 500. Today, we are extremely honored, and I'm really just personally excited to be talking to a product marketer. She's an experienced graphic designer, an expert at client services. She was a 2021 Top Woman in Media Tech Trailblazer Honoree, and right now she's a director of marketing at Celtra. Nikki Gertner, welcome to RevOps 500.
Hi, Sajeel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. So let's just jump right into it, Nikki. So the one question I'm going to ask you is, what is one RevOps myth?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing, right? Because like I was thinking about like myths and stories and storytelling, and I think when it comes to RevOps and it comes to marketing, so much of that has to do with storytelling. So I think like the myth that I would like to get into, I guess, today is that RevOps is just like one team with one specific function. I want to debunk that myth because I believe that RevOps is actually a very cross-departmental team with many different functions that ultimately culminate in a story, right? A narrative, something that, is going to be used by some stakeholder to have some proof points that something was driven, something, or was not driven, and some data can be used to make a decision and move forward. So that's kind of the myth I'd like to debunk, is that RevOps is just like one team, one person.
So if I mean that's a good one. I've never heard that one before, Nikki. So I mean, like, if RevOps is more than just one team and one person, who are the other people commonly in there besides
Yeah,
just like the RevOps team, I guess you want to call it, or like
right.
the
The
marketing team,
analysts.
whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. I think, first team that comes to my mind that is completely integral to the way that I've ever experienced RevOps in general was like a data insight team, a DI team.
Okay.
I often kind of come across this idea of having a centralized data intelligence platform, right? Like either you have a really great one or you don't, but if you don't have a team within your organization that's helping other people navigate that platform and kind of figuring out like where to go to get the proof points, get those data points to tell a proper story, then your marketing team has nothing to say. Your sales team has nothing to pitch. There's I think a really critical role held by DI teams and just data insights for the entire function of RevOps. So yeah, that's sort of the first group that comes to my mind. That's part of that collaborative journey. Obviously, you've got like your marketing teams, your copywriters, your designers, the teams that are sort of synthesizing this content and making it something digestible for someone to read or to watch. But again, yeah, they wouldn't have anything to synthesize if it wasn't for that DI team providing, the analysts, the RevOps, the marketers, something to work with. So yeah, shout out to everybody who's a DI person. You guys are the real heroes.
So when you talk about DI people, I mean it's these are the people who are putting all of the information together for RevOps people, customer success people, sales, marketing to make better decisions, right? It's not some sort of like really statistical, qualitative, private research lab team or anything like that.
Right. I would,
Okay.
and I mean that, I guess if there is some external team that is doing this job for an organization, I can imagine at like larger organizations that must happen. In my
Sure.
own experience, and I've only kind of ever worked at like smaller companies. But having someone internally that, not only like knows the business insight system, but can teach other people how to navigate that system and how to, pull information from it. If it's someone externally doing that, more power to them, as long as they can kind of communicate that, and that the internal team has, a solid connection with that person and can ask them questions on the fly, can, maybe, get on a Zoom call and have them walk them through a dashboard, stuff like that. I've found that to be so important, just having, like a solid relationship with a data insights person. Even if you're not the analyst, you're not the person who has to kind of look at this data and come to some sort of conclusion, just having someone who can walk you through that tool so that you know where to look and what to look at, and even the minutia of just like what the data is pulling in and from where. It's just so important, because otherwise, like, there's no context, and then those RevOps teams, if it's on them to create content or provide direction to designers and copywriters and things like that, it all really just stems back from being able to understand that business insight. So yeah, internally, I've seen having that DI connection is almost as important as having, I think, a good relationship as a RevOps person or a marketer with your product team. They're just sort of another function of the product team. And hopefully those things just really like layer in really neatly together. Yeah.
So I mean, they layer in kind of like, it's an extension of like the product marketing team, that data insights person, or like the people who are getting you the information that you need, turning all the analytics data from different websites or whatever into some sort of information from the CRM into actually something which can be tangible. They're definitely part of every part of the RevOps operation, probably.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, when it comes to that, I mean, that also does wean into the technical a little bit, right? I mean, like, and working in like different marketing technology platforms and all those sorts of things. I mean, even in RevOps, I mean, you probably, as a product marketer, you deal with a lot of that stuff too, right? So I mean, like, what sort of technical things keep you up at night from like a marketing technology perspective? I mean, in any capacity.
Yeah, I mean, I think keeping me up at night, and this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but the disparity of the data sets that exist across multiple platforms, right? Like that, I don't know, I'm just like kind of a very buttoned up person to begin with. So when I think about that, there might be, differences between information we have on a certain user in one of our, CRMs versus another, that kind of keeps me up at night.
Sure.
But again, having that DI person who pulls all the systems together and can kind of create just a like at a glance high level view of all this information that you do have access to, that helps, and then just like keeping in mind that there might be, some misconnections, some things that like don't quite line up, and trying to like work around that. I think that's like the most stressful part. I know in a lot of the communications I do as a product marketer, there's certain things that people are opted in for, people are opted out for. So that would be like a nightmare, right? If that information that of someone being opted in or opted out is incorrect in one of our systems, but another one of our systems has the correct information. So really just having something to look at and just see everything from that bird's eye view is super helpful in order to just kind of send the right, the right message, the right comms, and not piss people off.
So how do you solve a problem like that with discrepancies in data? How do you solve those sorts of issues?
Great question. I think, I've seen it get solved in two ways. The first way is to scrap the system and start fresh, right?
Wow.
Like if you, and which I do not recommend, like definitely.
It's like the nuclear codes.
Yeah, exactly. Just like blow up your whole system. This was something that, I mean, I'll even say like, I have experience in trying to do this where we had tried to migrate all of our information about, certain feedback and product analysis and stuff like that into Airtable, which I love, love that platform. It's really great. But taking that information from multiple sources and then just cutting those sources off, right? We're not even going to use those anymore. That's asking a lot. Like that's, that there's some legacy systems and other teams that use those programs for other reasons. So I definitely don't recommend just kind of like blowing up your system and starting afresh unless there's something really, really inherently wrong with your current system and it's not working and no one's successfully collaborating or getting any information from that. The refocusing of like what information is actually important and how reliable certain information is versus other information, if that makes sense, like just trying to sort of pivot the narrative so that even if you are aware there is like some discrepancy in data, like maybe there's something else, some other point of a common thread that you can kind of latch onto. And I think that's just like a huge part of RevOps to begin with, right? Is finding that common thread and rolling with that and running with that and turning that into like a repetitive message that go-to-market teams can say and sales teams can say. And just having no one really wants to see behind the curtain anyway of like where that data lines up or doesn't. So just having like one solid, I would say like no one who it isn't their job to do that. Yeah. Sure. They're not really interested in the ingredients. They just care about the dish, right? The finalized meal. So to serve up that dish, yeah, just having like one thing to stick to and just being confident that like that data set is reliable and true. That's sort of like the most important part, I'd say, to the journey of keeping all those data sets together. But yeah, as I said before, it's not something, I don't think it's something RevOps can do alone. I think, yeah, there are many teams that are touching that idea of, are we looking at the right data? Are we synthesizing that data into the right content? And then are we disseminating that content out to the right audiences? Yeah.
So like, can you think of I'm going to go back to the nobody cares about the ingredients, they care about the dish. So I mean, like, can you give like a specific example of where you've done that, where you said, okay, like we had this situation where the ingredients didn't necessarily add up, but we still made a great dish for the people who needed to eat.
Oh,
can you come up?
yeah.
Do you have a specific like that, or so you might? Sounds like you have a couple. I don't know.
I think I can talk towards that. Also, I'm just like getting hungry thinking about the dishes. But no, I think like a really like close topic to me, something that's sort of like been my baby while I've been at Celtra, has been a creative insights report that we publish on a quarterly basis. And the information that we're collecting from our users is, there's only so much that's visible to us because our users have access to a lot of different types of web inventory. Maybe there's like in-app inventory or mobile web, maybe it's video player inventory, stuff like that. But we at Celtra kind of can't really see past their wall, right? Like whatever they do and whatever, like that's information that they would have to tell us. So in order to, really even craft any kind of insights, we were kind of going into this blindly without having that layer of information of sort of what happens after Celtra and how to narrow that into, like an actionable narrative of like, and this is what we see for this channel, and this is what we see for this, serving method and stuff like that. So not having that information at first was kind of like a huge blocker. I had no idea how I was even going to try to create insights if I didn't have specific, funnels to be looking at that data through. Sitting down and thinking about it for a little while, there had to be this commonality that we came up with, some sort of like proprietary way of looking at all of this information without having, the minutia of what happens next. And so my solve was to sort of come up with my own system of classification I guess talking about like different combinations of experiences and goals that certain advertisements were meaning to drive. So without knowing like what happens next, right? That at least we could make an assumption based on what we did know and kind of go from there. Now, did that solve everybody's problems? Of course not. There, definitely the question of like, well, can't we drill this down even further, and can't we get insights into like the very specifics of what's happening in certain, types of app environments, things like that. Yeah, it's great. It would be great to be able to tell that story, but we just don't have that kind of insight as a company into what happens at that stage of the product development. So yeah, this like basically system of classifying things in a sort of our own like our own vision, our own like language had to be developed, which has its ups and downs. Like that language, it has to resonate with everyone who's then reading these insights and trying to take something away from it. And if it doesn't make sense to them, then the insights are useless. So it took a lot of like workshopping and speaking to our clients and kind of gathering ideas as to how we would even build this sort of system of classification. But as of now, we're on our like 4th edition that we're about to publish of this report. And I think it's been fun to sort of see the readers of this report kind of agree on this system of classification that we came up with. Whereas maybe at first they were like, well, this doesn't really mean anything to me. After multiple iterations of the report, they kind of start to see how this is applicable and how if this system gets applied in other ways to their own body of work, then how that could translate into a narrative that they'd be able to tell.
Yeah. So I mean, like that's like a significant amount of work to get to that point, though. I mean, like there was probably a lot of scar tissue from that process.
I would say it took a full year. It took a full year
Wow.
to have those conversations with clients, come up with a system of like how we were going to classify what we see our clients doing, sort of into buckets and like the lowest common denominators there. There's also a fun idea of I deal with advertising, right? And Celtra platform itself is a creative management platform for creating ads. Those ads have to be looked at by human eyes in order to really like make certain subjective calls about like what that ad says, what it's meant to do, what it's meant to drive. As we are exploring machine learning and trying to see like where this is going to go, obviously that process is going to change. But year or two ago, there was really no other way to do this but sitting there manually and looking at every single piece of information and creating these buckets that we'd be able to classify them into. But once we did that, that could be automated, and that it was sort of like the heavy lift in that year of developing this process and this sort of taxonomy of how we were going to classify things. And now it's just like a little bit easier because it's more repeatable. We already kind of have a handle on it.
So what would you do differently now if you had to go through the process again, or someone else was going through the process now? How would you handle it differently?
We got a lot of feedback from our clients, like through the process of reiterating this report and sharing it. I think I would have spent more time, upfront. Unfortunately, it would have made the sort of development process of that taxonomy last longer. But I think there could have been more deeper questions that were asked to these consumers of the report that would have helped us understand what a useful narrative even is, like what that reader is trying to get out of that report, and what they're trying to say and what they're trying to prove. Because again, like we might not have the insight into the minutia that makes a certain data set like prove that that reader's point, but maybe there's something else that we can see from some pattern, or just from knowing, you know, certain account types and certain regions and things like that have like certain performance metrics that we're seeing. Maybe those kinds of things would be able to be combined to, you know, help them prove that point. I think that's kind of how I would do it differently. So I don't know if that really answers the question. Just
yeah, no, it does.
More research, I guess.
Yeah.
Deeper research and into it. But it's something I think we were able to do, like, as the report has continued to develop and grow, and as we've gotten that feedback, we've been able to kind of incorporate sort of the idea of like stepping back and looking at like larger patterns and being able to say, you know, even though we can't see into this because we see this, one might assume that something else happens. Yeah, I know this is very I'm not talking in specifics here. I don't know how specific I should get. But yeah, it's especially like in the things we're analyzing, which can come down to really specific design and layout and creative details, different like combinations of images and text and positioning, things like that. Like it's very much like a puzzle that ends up getting put together. So just like knowing what all those puzzle pieces would even be from the start, like what our user base was looking to put together, that would have been, I think, where we'd spend more time.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, you talk about like understanding the user base better, looking into patterns, seeing kind of like use like almost like an if and then, right? Okay, I see A, B, and C. The next likely letter I'm going to see is probably D, then E, then F, maybe. You know, obviously, I'm simplifying it massively, but you know, like it seems like that's kind of what it is, which is kind of like a nice segue to the next question. It's kind of like, where do you see like the future of like RevOps or product marketing? Where do you see that going? I mean, do you see like, I mean, what can you tell from what you've seen to where it's going to be in the future?
Yeah, I think so product marketing, I'll start there because that's, you know, I came into that role and I'd never met anybody else that had product marketer in their title. I'd seen that it was around, but I hadn't actually like interfaced with anybody who was doing that. And now, like a couple of years into being a product marketer, I'd say that everyone I talk to that also is a product marketer has something different to say about their role. There's some difference about like how they function and exactly what they do. So like my hope is that there does become a little bit more standardization in this idea that like product marketing is a function of the product team, and that idea that like data insights and product marketing need to be in constant contact and sort of working towards the same goals. I hope that's what we see happening in the future. I think, you know, there's definitely arguments to be made that is the way it's going. That, you know, like more and more marketing teams in general are sort of being expanded to cover different, you know, like different functions. One of those things being product marketing. So having that focus on, and really just having like a dedicated team towards that data and the insights you pull from it and how to like communicate those insights and why they matter. Yeah, that's where I think this is going to go. It's just going to become like a no-brainer. That's just what the function of a product marketer is. Because I know when I came into the role, it was like, am I speaking to our existing client base? Am I speaking to prospects? Am I speaking to my internal team? Like who is my audience, you know? And I think, yeah, we're going to see that RevOps in general, like the audience is always going to be everyone. But that needs to be like a cross-functional role that the data insights team is helping tell.
Yeah, and that's I mean that emphasis on using the information better, more effectively. I mean, even with, like you talked about a little bit, machine learning, artificial intelligence, I feel like that's probably the way it's going to go, using all that information to make better human business decisions, right? I mean, I think that's probably probably a good segue, I mean, to the future. Like, wow, that's
Yeah.
a
I have
interesting
so
future to
many
think of.
questions about it too. And I'll
Yeah.
even like use my use case of like manually looking at different advertisements, and, you know, making a human decision that what is being communicated in this ad. Is it I'm gonna go, you should go buy something, or you should go check something out, or maybe there's some sort of public service announcement being given in that message, and it's not really like an action that's being taken. I look forward to, yeah, to having a future where that kind of process can be automated, and that we can sort of sift through content in a manageable way. Um, but at the same time, a part of me sort of fears that, right? Because
Sure.
we, you know, yeah, we with so much content out there, yeah, is it necessarily a good idea to lump things into categories? I'm not sure. You know, in the reports we were trying to publish, yes, we needed to. But yeah, I guess when you expand that to much larger data sets, much larger you know, subsections of content, it's a good question. I don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, I mean,
No one knows.
nobody
Yeah.
knows, right? I mean,
Nobody knows.
It's as good as answer as any, right? Nobody really
Yeah.
knows what's gonna happen. So let's go back in time a little bit. You know, like let's go back. I mean, so let's pretend, you know, you're going. This is like the old question, you know, you probably get from the special guest speaker in the college class or the high school class. You know, like, you know, how did you know you wanted to always be in marketing or in product marketing or RevOps? I mean, how did you get here? I mean, like, you know, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
what was the journey
Yeah.
to today almost?
I think, I mean, it all kind of starts from I got a job out of college in ad tech, just like
Okay.
for a company that was involved in ad tech. So I like my journey with RevOps, with marketing, with data storytelling, any of that really starts at its core with the technology that is used to like build and distribute and serve ads. And I've been in that space since like 2011.
Wow.
I worked at a couple different companies, both on like the technology vendor side and on the publisher side, you know, who has the content that is getting monetized versus the content that is doing the monetization on their sites. Yeah. So I've kind of seen like both sides of it. You know, I think my first real connection with like anybody RevOps, like, or even just seeing the function of how needing to tell those stories about like how money is being made and why and why that is going to further some initiative along or block a different initiative or be important for making a certain product decision, certain functionality of something. I started to see that firsthand when I worked for a publisher. It was a much bigger organization, and I think it just it allowed me to kind of see a lot more people all sort of like collaborating at the same time. We had a fantastic, you know, their RevOps Analysis. That's what their shout out Uchab Alam, if you're listening to this. He was on my podcast a couple months ago, so I got to give him a shout out. But he was, yeah, he was fantastic in terms of just being able to come to me, a marketer, a more visual person. I was you know, somewhat between like a product manager and a project manager at the time, and he was able to come to me with just facts, just straight facts. This is, you know, this is where we're losing money. This is where we're making money. Done. You know, so like that was, you know, critical for me in terms of like making decisions of which vendors am I going to use and like how many rounds of revisions can I reasonably sneak through here before we start getting charged extra fees and things like that. So just like learning that the like the RevOps story that those data sets, how that all kind of functioned into ultimately what became like a client facing marketing, you know, piece of collateral. That was really, really important. And like at a publisher level, like I had never seen anything like that before. I think up until this point, right, like, and so turning that then into more of like a product marketing role for myself, it kind of happened by accident. While I worked at that publisher, one of the technology vendors that we used to produce and distribute our advertisements, I was just a big fan of theirs. I really liked their product. It looked like Photoshop, it acted like Photoshop, and I knew
Nice.
Photoshop really well. So I just started using it all the time. And then, fast forward 3 years later, I end up working for them. So that's how I'm at Celtra still. But I like, as a marketer at Celtra, I would not have been able to, I think, like, even just like fulfill the role of product marketer had I not also been a user at one point. So kind of being on like both sides of that, and sort of like having remained in ad tech this entire time, I think has really like cemented me in this spot. I think, yeah, in terms of just marketing and communications and creating collateral and stuff, that's all been, kind of a running thread as early as when I was like, teenager making flyers for local shows that I'm trying to book, yeah, like that's marketing at its finest, I'd say. But the product aspect, right, the product marketing aspect, and being in touch with engineers and developers and product managers and stuff like that, that really, that's only been something that I've been exposed to in the past like 5 years or so. And it's been, I think that's been like super critical for allowing me to continue on this path of like being a specific, specifically calling myself a product marketer, right? Not just a marketer or a brand marketer or a content marketer or something like that. But really keeping it focused on the product and the information we see about how that product is being used, so that we can make decisions about what to do with it moving forward.
I mean, like, so now let's take that one step further. Let's pretend that you went back in time and you talked to that Nikki who was designing the flyers in high school or whatever. What advice, if any? I mean, what advice would you give Nikki doing the flyers?
Well, first of all, I'd tell her to avoid putting the flyers up on these like very specific poles that were around, because I got in a lot of trouble for that. That was not supposed to do that. But I think I would tell her that I think at the time, not having had any experience in like the corporate world, or in a world where the story needs to be told in order to defend certain decisions or certain moves that are made, I would have told her that like that data, that like that information it can be scary, but like don't get intimidated by it, because like, I don't know, you can imagine like I was a graphic designer. I was very passionate about comics and things like that. The idea of synthesizing information, especially something like sensitive information about usage of a certain product, or how much was spent, how much was earned, that seemed very intimidating to me as a like a production designer, a Flash designer, HTML5 designer. So I think I would have told her, yeah, like don't get scared by that it's just another number. It's just more information that ends up getting put on that flyer. And that it's kind of, there's nothing to be scared of, even though that spreadsheet might be really, really intimidating.
Yeah.
Because I think, I'm also the kind of person who I'll see like a tremendous amount of information and like my heart kind of seizes up a little. Like, it's just, there's just this like initial shock of like, oh my God, I have to go into like work mode, brain power mode, and really kind of understand what I'm looking at. And I don't think I'm the only one in this. Like, your eyes start to cross a little bit. It's like, oh God, I can't even like look at this right now. But yeah, I think like as any I don't know, as any designer or content creator learns to do, just taking bite-sized bits of that information and working through it. I think that was just like a skill I had to learn. So I'd tell myself, like, just chill, you're going to learn that skill. And it's, you're going to have to keep working on it too. It's not like you just perfect it. Like every new data set that I get introduced to, I still feel like intimidated, and still like that, have to take like certain steps to make sure that I'm consuming a certain chart, that I'm spending certain time with that chart and really understanding like what I'm looking at. And shout out to Power BI, Microsoft Power BI, really big fan of that tool, because
Makes it easy.
that has made it so much easier. Oh my gosh, so much easier, especially in the past couple of years of my work life. It's just been wonderful. So yeah, just having like a cool collected head and not getting intimidated by that data. That's what I would tell anybody. Like, good luck. I hope you can do that, or like you'll learn to do that. And it gets, I guess it's a muscle that gets stronger. Maybe doesn't get any easier to do, but it just becomes kind of a little bit more of an automatic function of your brain.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that you were into comics, and stuff like that. I mean, what other stuff do you do for fun? I know you're like, you're a hardcore punk fan. I mean, what else can you tell listeners about what you do for fun? I mean, when you're not when you're not conquering the world at work, I mean, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? It's interesting. I've been like really reconsidering a lot of that ever since COVID-19 and the pandemic. And I think I'm again not alone in this. Like everyone kind of like was questioning or is questioning sort of like what is worth spending their time on and why.
Sure.
So yeah, like you mentioned, like I'm a huge part of like my local music scene, and I think one of my greatest pleasures in the world is like promoting bands and seeing like up and coming artists and younger kids who are just making things, creating things, and it doesn't even have to be good. It's just cool that they're creating it. So I think that's kind of what I do for fun. I don't know, I spend a lot of time like researching bands I've never heard of and then just like listening to them. And I used to keep a blog about it, but I haven't been doing that lately. And maybe it'll turn into another podcast. I don't know. We'll see. That's kind of on my to-do list of maybe someday. Doesn't feel quite like too far off, but I think it will come to fruition one day. So yeah, that's kind of what I do for fun. It's like a weird place to be in, right? Because like kind of hard to be a punk in advertising or whatever. Like it's kind of hard to like fight capitalism while directly promoting capitalism. So this is often a conundrum I find myself in. And I think that there is something to it though. There's something to like knowing how the systems work and what individuals can do to monetize themselves and like take control and autonomy over that kind of thing. And especially when it comes to advertising and having tools that allow you to make that happen for yourself, and where you don't need to rely on other people. You're able to see the data, you're able to craft your narrative, and you're able to tell people your own story of like, this is the success that I drive for people. I think, especially now, I know so many people that are looking for jobs and stuff like that. And I know the economy is in crazy place right now. So just being able to look at like your own information and craft that into some story that you can tell on your resume or an interview. Maybe you don't have that much information about like how much revenue you drove at a specific quarter, or how many like victories you were kind of able to see across the finish line. But if you have just like some amount of information, how many people you spoke to in a certain amount of time, or how many hits some of your content got, like weaving those numbers together and being able to tell that story of self like independence and self-reliance it's critical. It's critical in terms of like how anyone like can monetize themselves on the web these days. So yeah, it's I'm very interested in that intersection. I'd like to see sort of where that's all going. I'm horrified, but at the same time excited.
Yeah, and you're kind of in the middle of all that. But so I mean, Nikki, where can people get in touch with you? Where can they learn more about you?
Yeah, so I don't have a Twitter. I've been told I should, but I think the best place would be, shoot me an email, especially if you're in the ad tech space. My email is nikki@celtra.com. That's NIKKI, 2 Ks, at Celtra, CELTRA.com. But then, I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm just Nikki Gertner, or Nicole Gertner if you're nasty. And that's where you can find me. The podcast is called the Celtra podcast that I produce is called Media Side. And hopefully we'll be bringing that back in the next couple of months. But you can find that just Media Side on iTunes, Apple, all the places where you stream podcasts.
Got it. I mean, well, Nikki, it's been a huge enlightening pleasure talking to you.
Hope so.
I mean, like, you had a very, as a product marketer, you brought a very unique perspective to to me anyway, for sure, about kind of what you go through. The insights part of it was very, very telling to me. I feel like I personally got a lot out of this. So just thanks for coming on and jamming me a little on this.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
basically me just telling everyone that the hard work is really done by other people. No. Like TLDR. But no, this is great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I mean, and like for everybody else who's listening or who will be listening, I mean, if you learned something today, or if if you laughed at one of Nikki's jokes, just tell someone else about the podcast. And Nikki, thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been another exciting episode of RevOps 500, and we'll see you all next time.
And that wraps up another episode of RevOps 500. Thanks for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at RevOps500.com. RevOps 500 is sponsored by CompuTech, providing technical and development expertise to growth-focused marketing.